Today I'm going to be talking about differentiated instruction. First, we need to know that not all students will have the same learning capabilities or even learn the same way. Because of inclusion, a classroom will have students of all abilities. A classroom may consist of students who are gifted, while at the same time contain students who have a learning disability. Differentiated instruction is about attending to the learning needs of students with multiple learning differences rather than teaching the class as if all students learn the same. It is about helping all students learn to their maximum potential. In fact, research has shown that different strategies used in differentiated instruction are not only effective for students with learning disabilities, but actually helped all students in the classroom. So what is differentiated instruction? Differentiated instruction is when a teacher modifies the content or what is being taught, the process or how it is taught, and the product or how students demonstrate their learning. In other words, teachers in a differentiated classroom align their instruction with the different learning needs of their students. Teachers don't just use one strategy, but a variety of strategies with an ongoing assessment to see how their students are performing. Let's look at more specifics about how teachers differentiate instruction. As stated earlier, not all students learn the same. Therefore, one strategy of differentiated instruction is to divide students into groups. One group may need help with reading while others with math. One group may be gifted students, while another could be learners who struggle. Therefore, the teacher first needs to know his or her students in terms of their readiness, interests, and learning profile. Readiness refers to a student's knowledge and skill level in a particular subject area. A student's readiness level might vary by subject matter. A readiness determination can be made by using both formal or informal tests such as standardized tests or unit pre-tests. Teachers can also look at work samples and the student's academic record. Secondly, a teacher needs to know his student's interests. If a student is interested in a particular topic, skill, or activity, the teacher can then incorporate these. Lastly, students need to have a learning profile. This profile refers to a student's preferred method of learning. Possible ways of learning might include visually or hands-on. Environmental factors are also part of this profile. Does a student prefer to learn in a small group, or do they prefer to learn by themselves in a quiet area with no distractions? Once a teacher knows his students' learning needs and styles, they can begin implementing different instruction strategies. There are three main instructional elements that a teacher can adjust. As stated before, these include content, process, and product. There is no set way to adjust these elements as it depends on the needs of each student. When teachers differentiate content, the same concept or skill is taught to the entire class. However, the curriculum used to teach each concept or skill may be different for different students. The teacher will take into consideration each student's readiness, interests, and learning profile to determine the best strategy. A few strategies used are tiered content, providing a variety of materials, presentation styles, scaffolding, learning contracts, and compacting. Let's learn about a couple of these. Tiered content is when all students complete that same activity, but the content varies in difficulty. The students may be divided into three groups based on their readiness levels. Group 1 would work on a task of low difficulty, Group 2 a medium difficulty task, and Group 3 would have the most difficult task. In these groups, the students may work together as one group or perhaps in pairs. Group 1 with the least difficult task would most likely consist of slow learners or learners who struggle with the subject area. This group would most likely have the help of a teacher. Group 3 may consist of gifted students or students who excel in the subject area. Teachers should utilize a variety of presentation styles that allow students to choose what works best for them. Presentation styles can vary by say it, show it, or model it. Say it could include a lecture, discussion, or reading aloud. Show it could consist of pictures or graphics, a transparency, or even a whiteboard. Lastly, model it would be demonstrating, building, using manipulatives, or acting out. Media options that a teacher could use include video, audio, computer, and television. Teachers can also differentiate product. When teachers differentiate product, they evaluate the same concept or skill for each student at the end of a unit of study. However, teachers may offer their students different ways to demonstrate their knowledge. The traditional test may not be the best means to test knowledge, as those students who struggle in reading may find a written test difficult. Therefore, other methods of testing knowledge such as a written report, tic-tac-toe, or even a video on a computer could be used. At times, students may be allowed to complete the test or project as a group. When teachers use differentiated instruction, they are constantly evaluating how their students are doing and changing strategies to what works best for each student. However, students still need to receive grades. In a traditional classroom, teachers report one grade that reflects achievement, growth, and habits. A student in a differentiated learning classroom would receive an individual grade for all three categories rather than this one grade. How do teachers prepare their students for differentiated instruction? At the beginning of the year, the teacher should discuss what differentiated instruction is with his or her students. This helps the students understand what the differentiated classroom will be like and how it will be beneficial to each student. If the students understand, they are more likely to buy into the concept of differentiated instruction. It is not only important that teachers communicate with the students about differentiated instruction, but also with the parents. Additional items the teachers should communicate to both students and parents include that all students will be challenged, not all students will be working on the same activities or assignments, make sure the understood role of the teacher is different, differentiated instruction is more student-led activities and less teacher-led, make sure they understand how activities and projects will be assigned, understand how test results will be used. Basically, test results will not only be used to evaluate students, but for the teacher to choose an instructional strategy and then to provide feedback to the students. And lastly, how grades will be assigned. What does differentiated instruction look like in a classroom? A differentiated classroom is arranged differently than a traditional classroom where the teacher is at the front and the students are all aligned in a row. In a differentiated classroom, the teacher should consider more flexible options. Generally, a teacher's desk is not central but out of the way from the student's desk, as it is rarely used during instruction time. The student's desk may be arranged for those that prefer to work independently and quietly, or in a group for those that prefer learning in a group atmosphere. The teacher needs to ensure that all students can easily see the presentations and that the teacher can see the students. The classroom needs to be well organized to make efficient use of space, and multiple furniture arrangements may be used that support different instructional activities. A round table may be used for centers or an area for additional activities. High traffic areas need to be free from congestion and floor space needs to be fully used. Bulletin boards and wall space need to be used to provide helpful information to their students. Lastly, frequently used supplies need to be readily accessible and organized storage. The teacher must have effective behavior management in the classroom. To do this, rules, expectations, and procedures need to be established and verbalized to the students. These rules may vary depending upon the activity the class is performing. If the class is working in small groups, the rules may be different than a whole class discussion. Noise levels need to be monitored, and for those who can't work in a noisy situation, headphones may be provided. Some students work slower than others, so additional tasks or materials need to be available for those students who finish their work more quickly. Below are some common classroom practices. I'll explain why each are not examples of differentiated instruction and what teachers could do differently. The first practice delivers instruction primarily about lecturing. As we learned earlier, not all students learn the same. In a traditional classroom, the teacher may stand in the front of the room and lecture. This is a teacher-centered approach. However, in a differentiated classroom, instruction is a student-centered approach. Other teaching methods are used other than just a teacher-centered lecture. The strategy chosen may be based on the student's readiness, interests, and learning profiles. As an example, if the teacher is teaching math, he may ask each student to get at the whiteboards and use a hands-on approach. Following the initial instruction, the teacher may let the students work in pairs to complete the worksheet. For those students who prefer to work alone, that is also allowed. Some students may choose to use computer-aided practice games rather than a handwritten worksheet. The point is that learning isn't just about the teacher standing in front of the class lecturing. It is about knowing how the students learn best and allowing them to do that. The second practice is grouping students at the beginning of the year based on the previous year's achievement test scores. Students shouldn't be grouped by achievement scores only. In a differentiated learning classroom, students should be grouped by their readiness, interest, and learning profile. Students in a differentiated classroom should be evaluated consistently, not just based on grouping on how well a student performed the previous school year. Lastly, students' knowledge and skill level may vary by subject matter. Therefore, A student may need to be grouped differently depending upon the subject matter being taught. Again, these groupings may consistently change throughout the year depending upon continual evaluations. The last practice is giving bonus points for classroom participation. In a traditional classroom, the teacher may give bonus points as she wants students to actively participate. However, in a differentiated classroom, the grades should be determined by mastery of the subject matter. If extra credit assignments are given, they should be related to the content of what is being said. Not all children are outgoing, and many may feel uncomfortable talking out loud during a traditional class. They may be more comfortable in a one-on-one situation or in a small group. There is no reason to discriminate and give bonus points only to those kids who are willing to participate in a large group traditional classroom setting. Again, each student may prefer a different learning environment, and that is okay. And here are my references.